Intro music. Sombre. Historical. Slightly eerie. Visual. Archival footage, stills of World War I. Trenches. Soldiers. Then gradually shifting to blurred, unsettling images of crowded hospitals or masked figures. Narrator. Imagine a world already brought to its knees. 4 brutal years of global conflict. The Great War had claimed millions of lives, scarred landscapes, and shattered empires. Yet, as the guns of August fell silent, another, far more insidious enemy was sweeping across the globe, an invisible assassin that would ultimately claim more lives than all the battles combined. This is the story of the 1918 Spanish flu pandemic, a catastrophe so profound, so devastating, that it reshaped societies, yet for decades remained largely forgotten, often overshadowed by the epic tragedy of World War I. The Spanish flu was a plague of unprecedented scale. A H1N1 influenza virus that attacked with a ferocity rarely seen before or since. It didn't discriminate by nationality, class, or battle lines. It targeted the young and healthy, leaving a trail of death and despair in its wake. But how did this silent killer emerge, spread so rapidly, and leave such an indelible, albeit often unacknowledged, mark on history? Join us as we uncover the origins, the terrifying spread, the devastating impact, and the enduring legacy of the Spanish flu, a pandemic that serves as a stark, chilling reminder of humanity's enduring vulnerability. Visual. Map showing troop movements across the Atlantic and Europe, then highlighting Kansas. Narrator. Our journey begins not in the muddy trenches of Europe, but in the heartland of America. March 1918. In a military training facility known as Camp Funston, part of Fort Riley, Kansas, Private Albert Gitchell, a cook, reported to the infirmary with a fever, sore throat, and headache. Within hours, over 100 more soldiers were suffering from similar symptoms. This was the first documented outbreak of what would become the Spanish flu. Initially, this first wave was relatively mild. Symptoms resembled a severe cold or seasonal flu, and while many fell ill, the mortality rate was low. However, these soldiers, soon to be deployed to the European front, became unwitting carriers. They boarded crowded troop transports, sailed across the Atlantic, and disembarked into the bustling ports of France and Britain, carrying the nascent virus with them. The perfect storm was brewing. By April, the flu had reached the Western Front, infecting troops on both sides. British, French, and German soldiers were falling ill, sometimes by the thousands. Yet, wartime censorship meant that news of this widespread illness was suppressed in warring nations to maintain morale. Only in neutral Spain were newspapers free to report on the devastating epidemic sweeping through their country, even infecting King Alfonso XIII. This open reporting led to the enduring, though misleading, moniker, the Spanish flu. Compelling historical fact 1. The Spanish flu did not originate in Spain, but its neutrality allowed its press to report openly on the disease, leading to the lasting misnomer. Visual. Archival photos of crowded military camps, troop ships, then hospitals with nurses attending to patients. Narrator. This initial wave, while disruptive, was merely a prelude. The virus was mutating, evolving into something far more sinister. By late summer and early autumn of 1918, the second wave emerged, and it was horrifyingly different. This mutated H1N1 strain was extraordinarily virulent, attacking with a speed and ferocity that stunned medical professionals. Unlike typical influenza, which predominantly targets the very young, the elderly, or those with compromised immune systems, the 1918 flu had a terrifying preference for the young and healthy, particularly those aged 20 to 40. Their robust immune systems, instead of fighting off the virus effectively, would overreact, unleashing a cytokine storm that flooded the lungs with fluid, leading to acute respiratory distress and often death. Victims would rapidly develop severe symptoms: high fever, extreme fatigue, and muscle aches. But then, the horror would truly begin. Their skin would turn a ghastly blue or purple due to lack of oxygen, a condition known as cyanosis. Many would suffer from hemorrhages, bleeding from the nose, ears, and even eyes. Lungs would fill with frothy, bloody fluid, essentially drowning the patient from the inside. Death could occur within hours or days of the first symptoms appearing. Visual. Global map with red dots spreading rapidly. Then images of crowded makeshift hospitals. Nurses. Doctors looking exhausted. Narrator. The global spread of this second wave was unprecedented. As soldiers returned home from the war, they carried the deadly virus to every corner of the planet. From the bustling metropolises of London, New York, and Paris, to remote villages in Alaska and the distant shores of Samoa. No place was safe. Compelling historical fact 2. The 1918 flu spread globally faster than any other disease in history. Up to that point, reaching even isolated communities like those in the Arctic and remote Pacific Islands within months, often via steamships and troop movements. Healthcare systems were utterly overwhelmed. Hospitals overflowed. Corridors filled with dying patients. And doctors and nurses, themselves falling ill and dying, struggled against an invisible foe they couldn't understand or effectively treat. There were no antibiotics to combat the secondary bacterial pneumonia that often sealed a patient's fate, and no antiviral medications to target the flu itself. Medical science, whilst advanced for its time, was powerless. Public health officials implemented desperate measures: mandatory mask wearing, quarantines, closure of schools, theaters, churches, and other public gatherings. In some cities, like Philadelphia, the decision to proceed with a massive Liberty Loan parade in September 1918 proved catastrophic, leading to an explosion of cases and deaths within days. Morgues ran out of space, and coffins became scarce. Mass graves were dug as communities struggled to cope with the sheer volume of the deceased. The human cost was staggering. Estimates vary, but it's believed that the Spanish flu infected approximately 1/3 of the world's population, around 500 million people. The death toll is even more difficult to ascertain precisely, but modern estimates range from 50 million to 100 million lives lost globally. To put that into context, World War I claimed around 15 to 22 million lives. Compelling historical fact 3. The Spanish flu killed more people in a single year than the 4 years of the Black Death in the 14th century and more than all the combat deaths of World War I combined. Visual. Archival photos of people wearing masks. Empty streets. Funeral processions. Families grieving. Narrator. **** as autumn turned to winter. The second wave began to recede, but not before a third, less severe, wave emerged in early 1919. By the summer of 1919, The pandemic had largely burned itself out, the virus gradually becoming less virulent as the population developed some level of immunity. But the scars remained deep and pervasive. The economic impact was profound. Labor shortages crippled industries. Supply chains broke down, and international trade suffered. The social fabric of communities was torn apart by grief. Millions of children were orphaned, and countless families were left bereft. The psychological trauma on survivors, who had witnessed such widespread death and suffering, was immense and often unaddressed. Even the highest echelons of power were not immune. U.S. President Woodrow Wilson fell severely ill with the flu during the crucial Paris Peace Conference in 1919, leading some historians to speculate that his weakened state might have influenced the terms of the Treaty of Versailles, arguably contributing to future geopolitical instability. Compelling historical fact 4. Survivors of the 1918 flu sometimes experience long-term health complications, including neurological disorders like encephalitis lethargica, sleeping sickness, and Parkinsonism, as well as mental health issues and increased susceptibility to other illnesses. Visual. Modern scientific images. DNA strands. Researchers in labs. Then images of public health organizations like WHO, CDC. Narrator. So, why was such an immense tragedy largely forgotten for so long? Several factors contributed. The sheer scale of World War I, its political and social aftermath, and the subsequent crises of the Great Depression and World War II simply overshadowed the pandemic. People, exhausted by years of death and disruption, wanted to move on, to forget the horrors. There was no single enemy to blame, no victory to celebrate, only an invisible, indiscriminate killer. Furthermore, the lack of a unified global response or comprehensive record-keeping meant the full picture of the pandemic's toll was slow to emerge. However, the Spanish flu did leave a critical, if often unacknowledged, legacy. It fundamentally changed our understanding of infectious diseases and catalyzed the development of modern public health infrastructure. It spurred research into virology, epidemiology, and vaccine development, laying the groundwork for future pandemic preparedness. Institutions like the World Health Organization and the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, whilst established later, owe much to the lessons painfully learned during the 1918 crisis. In a remarkable feat of modern science, researchers in the late 1990s and early 2000s managed to reconstruct the genetic sequence of the 1918 virus from preserved tissue samples of victims, including an Alaskan woman buried in permafrost. This groundbreaking work has provided invaluable insights into the virus's virulence and helped us understand the potential threats of future influenza pandemics. Compelling historical fact 5. The complete genome of the 1918 Spanish flu virus was successfully reconstructed in 2005 from preserved tissue samples, including those from an Inuit woman exhumed from Alaskan permafrost, allowing scientists to study its deadly characteristics. Visual. Transition back to somber, reflective historical imagery. Perhaps a memorial, or a modern image of a quiet, empty street reflecting on the past. Narrator. The Spanish flu pandemic of 1918 stands as a chilling testament to the power of nature and the fragility of human life. It was a global catastrophe that claimed tens of millions, profoundly impacting societies, economies, and politics. Yet it slipped into the shadows of history. But its lessons, about the importance of public health, international cooperation, and scientific research resonate more strongly than ever in our interconnected world. As we navigate the challenges of our own time, remembering the Spanish flu is not just an act of historical remembrance, but a vital reminder that we must always be vigilant, prepared, and willing to learn from the silent killers of the past. The 1918 pandemic may have been forgotten by many, but its echoes continue to shape our present and inform our future. Outro music builds slightly, then fades. Visual. Channel logo. Subscribe prompt. Narrator. Thank you for joining us on this journey through a pivotal, yet often overlooked, chapter of history. If you found this video insightful, please like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Until next time, keep exploring the past to understand our world today. End.